Hello, fellow riders of the hypnotic crazy train. I'm Chris Thompson, your semiconductor on this linguistic locomotive. And yes, this is the Brain Software Podcast, episode 161. Today, Mike Mandel and I continue our discussion of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, almost live from the Hypnotic World Epicenter, Toronto, Canada. So, stay tuned.
And so our little soiree draws to a rather sudden and drastic close. The limitations of pseudoscience and the awful frequency of our transderivational searches conspire to ensure that all the cheese blintzes will be eaten and all the hundirigibles shot down. And nevertheless, fairness demands a response, and for that reason, and in that cause and spirit, we shall engage the enemy on all fronts, whether it be on the battlefield or in the kitchen. And so, in summary, I call upon Jack Ruby, Patricia Krenwinkel, Labrador Dobster, and all their associates to reveal the citations that have led to such a moribund array of moray eels.
Please shut up.
I shall. But seriously, ladies and gentlemen, can anyone inform me as to the whereabouts of that elderly piece of mind that up until now camped out in our hearts and conscious awareness?
These are days of victory! So let's welcome to the captain's stateroom, our piratical leader who could easily neck crank Sigmund Freud. Toronto's answer to that musical question, what the hell are you guys on? And the hypnotic Hercules himself, Mike Mandel!
Yes, that was a good one, Chris. Notice I led in with a small...
Yes, I
Bad
noticed.
news, everyone. I brought back the guinea pig laugh. Still funny to me. Still funny to me.
Right. I love that line.
That's the MCA
It's not
line.
funny. It's
like
still funny to
MCA's
me.
life, yeah. His wife saying to him, it's not funny. It's not funny. It's still funny to me.
Yeah. I think that is the secret to having an awesome life.
It is, buddy. Now, let's get through our usual banter, promos, and ongoing encouragement.
Let's make sure that we remind you this is part number 2 of our 2-part series on neuro-linguistic programming. We haven't really deep dive. We haven't done a deep dive into NLP for a while. We want to make this easy and understandable.
And we're continuing
useful.
that today.
Right, we're continuing that today. So that's what today is all about.
But buddy, I want to say, did you notice we got an amazing email yesterday, and the woman just said, Mike, I want you to know Journey to the Castle has changed my life. Thanks.
Wow.
I mean, this is a freebie.
This is probably among the best free content that we've ever put out. It's a weird thing to say because it's different free content. Typically, we've given out different sort of free content, like the Nuvi course, which is a free course on how to do conversationally hypnotic language. This is a hypnosis track, totally free hypnosis track for self-use. It's amazing. You're going to love it. People have been raving about the quality of Journey to the Castle, and you can get it for yourself at MikeMandelHypnosis.com/castle.
Now, interestingly, Chris, notice that you were showing me this morning before I made the trip from the shores of Bob Lake, our little cabin, to Hypno East here in Port Perry, Ontario. But it's almost Toronto, so it still counts.
Right.
But interestingly, you showed me how someone had posted and said, nothing's free. Well, this is, guys. We give a lot of stuff away, and we want you to have awesome lives.
Yeah, it's a very weird thing with Facebook ads. People are, I don't know what it is, but people are so quick to judge and jump down your throat and tear you a new one. They're obsessed with the idea that, oh, you couldn't possibly be giving anything out for free. Now, obviously, if we're going to pay to advertise something on Facebook and we're going to give you something for free, the follow-up page is probably going to have some sort of offer, which will allow you to become a customer if you want. But it's not required.
No.
People go, oh, this isn't free. You're asking for my credit card. No, we're not. We're offering you something. It's like, here's a free pack of gum. Would you like to purchase a Snickers bar? No, please don't eat either. Don't eat Snickers bar. We're not into junk food. As
not saying anything wrong with it.
But you get the idea, right? Obviously, here's something free. It's called a business model. Yeah. Here's something that's completely free. Take it. Enjoy it. Oh, and by the way, we have other stuff for you should you choose to become a customer. We hope you do. We think you'll love it, but it's certainly not required. Some people are just weird.
It's crazy. I remember, Chris, a couple of years ago, somebody sent us a helpful email saying, the thing you're putting on Facebook, they'll yank you down for promoting all these things on Facebook. You're not allowed to do that. You said,
That's called their business model.
These are paid ads.
Yeah.
We're paying to have it there. It's not just some random anyway.
Yeah,
you can't fix stupid, buddy. Although God knows I've tried.
Okay, let's move on and
think tank.
Let's do the think tank. All right.
See, Chris, why don't you explain what that swell thing, the think tank is?
The think tank is every episode we pick 3 words and they're randomly chosen. And I say we, I mean Mike picks them.
Yeah.
And when you're up at the cottage, the cabin, I suppose you're doing these via the online word finder tool, whatever it is that you use. These are 3 words out of the English language that we simply map across into what we're doing so that we can brainstorm some thoughts around what do these words mean, and then we can map across for creativity and fun and awesomeness as we're discussing the content.
Well put, young man. Well put. We're using Edward de Bono's amazing technique of using these things as stepping stones to lead to different ideas. They're randomly introducing chaos into what we're talking about. And our job is to then connect these stepping stones to the content.
All right, let's do them.
Well, the first one is county.
I thought I misread it. I thought it said country. Ooh,
no,
I positively hallucinated an R
county,
there.
finding, and magazine. So lead off with county. What do you get?
County just actually makes me think the same as country. It makes me think borders. And when you cross borders, you're in a different area. But really, they're just arbitrary.
Is this a COVID reference?
I'm not saying that it isn't.
Right. Okay. Now, but you see, when I hear county, I hear the county, which is Prince Edward County, not far from here, east of here. Prince Edward County is a wine appellation.
It's nice.
They do some great Pinot Noir. I know Norm Hardy there has done some terrific work, and also Sandbanks does some really good Baco Noir.
I like
that.
But
so how does that fit, though, to NLP? Maybe sometimes you got to get outside the city. You need a new environment to blossom.
And it also reminds me of the map is not the territory.
Oh, brilliant. Right? The map is not the territory. NLP axiom.
Which I think we covered that in the last episode.
Yes, we did. Now, the next one is finding.
Ooh, well, finding. What are we looking for? Finding. We can be looking in NLP terms. We can look to find meaning in things.
Okay. Now, finding things like in the county, that implies that you're going outside your normal area. Maybe it's a recreational trip, but you're going to bring fun into this whole finding thing. Looking into the topic we're talking about today, bringing in fun and finding ways to apply this to your own life, to have a better life.
Absolutely.
What about magazine?
Magazine, the third word. Magazine.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me think of a cough. No, magazine. Magazine has me thinking about colorful and fun. Just images, magazines shouldn't be boring.
This is the Enneagram 9 speaking. Yeah, I see that word and I think of the magazine on a freaking gun right away.
Magazine, yeah. I suppose that's a different,
it's somewhat of a magazine. Different thing. Yeah, it can lead to a lot of color, usually red. It makes
me think of, walking into a bookstore and there will always be a big magazine rack.
Oh,
and
I know
there's
what you mean.
So much
there
variety.
I used
to love walking around,
and stealing
whether
magazines.
It be Cole's Books or Chapters, Indigo,
brand names mentioned.
Or I guess if you're in the States, it would be Barnes & Noble or something like that. And there was this massive wall of magazines.
Like Duke of War Monthly.
Always so much stuff, right? So it just goes to show you. In fact, it reminds me, I was on the website for the Great Courses yesterday. And the immense opportunity there is to learn new things.
Yeah, man.
That's what magazine makes me think of right now.
Yeah, I love the Great Courses. I know what you mean exactly. I used to peruse the psychology magazines and also the martial arts magazines. I used to have a subscription to Tactical Knives.
Okay,
Heather thought it was weird.
Why does that not surprise me?
I know. But so let's think of it. A magazine exposes us to glossy versions of reality that are set up according to specific topics. How does that serve us, though?
How does it serve us? Well, we have choice. We have lots of choice as to where we invest our time, who we invest our time with.
All right, so let's invest our time in looking at NLP right now.
All right, let's do it.
Can you recap anything off the top of your head of what we did last podcast?
Well, we probably talked about, you know what, I can't even remember. It was a couple of weeks ago we recorded that episode, but I'm sure we talked about some of the basic NLP presuppositions, like the map is not the territory.
I thought it was last week.
Maybe it was, yeah.
It was a week ago, like almost to the moment.
Well, it feels like it was 2 weeks.
It does, doesn't it? So that's right.
Okay, your job is to recap.
Quick recap. Well, we talked about just NLP is a model. It's not truth. It's not an epistemology or, a philosophy class. NLP is a model, and it's looking for, we called it, one version is the science of personal excellence. Success leaves clues behind that we can track and follow and come to new material, come to new ways of doing things, have a better freaking life.
Yes.
It helps us model what other people do. It helps us find ways to eliminate fears and anxieties and work at peak performance. So it's a tool, or it's a set of tools, a box of tools, which was brought out by Mandel and Grinder in the early 1970s. They bifurcated.
Right. We talked about the history of NLP.
Yes. And so it's a model of models. It's the science of personal excellence, and they model 3 therapists.
Yeah. In fact, we talked about the fact that they modeled 3 therapists, but had they modeled 3 others, we might have a totally different system.
3 mechanics.
So because they modeled a hypnotist, a family therapist, and Fritz Perls, how would you? You were going to skip that. What would you describe Perls as?
Well, he came up with Gestalt therapy.
Therapy, which was fall into what category?
A lot of shouting at empty chairs and things, and
so it's just a model of psychotherapy.
Yeah. He was very effective at what he did. Yeah,
and that came out in the 70s, and that have we addressed the fact that we call it the science of personal excellence, but when we say science, this is not the kind of thing that you do in a laboratory.
No.
There are no real controlled conditions or anything like that. Just like any form of communication, we can say that there's a science to being influential, or is there, you could say that there's a science, let's say, even to being funny.
Which, of course, is then going to imply that there's a logical series of steps that one can do to achieve that result. In that sense, it's scientific.
Right, but I suppose you wouldn't have laboratory-controlled conditions for, is this particular fellow funny or not? That would just be weird, right? You have to interact with the audience that you have. Similarly, in NLP, you have to interact, you have to use your language and perception and calibration and all these things to deal with the person in front of you.
And the idea, of course, is that you're using language to have a neurological effect ultimately. So the brain is going to change as a result. Anyway, if you look on Wikipedia, it defines NLP as a pseudoscience, which I find really, I read it and, all this, you read people and say it doesn't work. It isn't a thing. It's a way of proceeding. It's like hypnosis is not a thing. It's a set of procedures.
NLP people will not describe NLP as a science.
No.
So it's kind of weird to attack it as being a pseudoscience, i.e. a thinly veiled, not real science. No one's claiming it's a science.
Right. No,
it's a series of models.
There's 2 points I want to make at this juncture. Stop scrolling away from everything.
Okay.
I've got all my nice notes, and he's scrolling like Jack the frickin' scroller. Scrolling in the scrollery. Now, what is interesting here is there's 2 things that come up. One of them is the mythology that was stated early on, and this, of course, has been attacked ruthlessly. And I agree, it is not correct to believe that with NLP that anything anybody else can do, we can do. It's
that would be
simply
a bit
not true.
Ludicrous.
Even if one removes physical limitations, like, I can box like Muhammad Ali if I just model the strategy he had to be probably the greatest boxer of all time. It's not going to work. But then you can't even take it to the point of, how does a great chess player think? Someone like Magnus Carlsen or Garry Kasparov. You can maybe dissect the methods they use to evaluate the position, then what they do with that, find the internal strategies of how they think, what they feel, all of these things to improve one's own game.
That's it. It's a shortcut to improve.
But
it
you're
is
not
not a
going to be a world
shortcut
chess champion.
to duplicate their exact results.
Right. So that's the first thing that kind of annoys me when people think that. Here's the second thing. Actually, there's 2 more. These are 2 of the NLP mistakes, I think. One of them is, and as an NLP trainer, I can say this. One of them is I've run into a lot of people who take an NLP course, become a practitioner, master practitioner, whatever, depending on what organization is certifying them. And then they don't actually apply it in their own life. They want to just teach NLP. They want to be the next Tony Robbins.
Yeah, or they become, I thought you were going to say they become a mind reader.
Well, that's the one. That's where we're going after this.
Okay.
That's point 3. But yeah, they want to be, one guy told me he became an NLP trainer because he wants to be the next Tony Robbins.
Right.
So the whole point with us is apply these things in your own life. You don't study NLP to be an NLP trainer necessarily, although I did. But Am I making any sense with this at all?
You're making complete sense to me.
Right.
It's all about the idea. You don't just learn something so that you can teach it.
So you can rise up some pinnacle and make a lot of money with it, although I suppose that's all right. Now, the third one is what you've alluded to already, Chris, the whole concept of we're taught with NLP, the meta model, which is using language to clarify language. And John Grinder being a linguist, he got this right. The problem is one of these things in the meta model is mind reading, this idea that we can't tell what someone is thinking unless they tell us. And we get into all sorts of complex equivalents. Oh, remember I told you I was eating at the CN Tower, top of Toronto restaurant where we went with the Jacquins, which is amazing, and having a great meal there with a friend of mine and Deanie Petty from, Toronto Television on City TV. We're having dinner and he said to me, this guy said, "You are close to this conversation." I went, "What?" And he said, "You've got your arms folded. The body language means," and he did this complex equivalence that it meant.
Reading.
It's mind reading. I wasn't close to any conversation. I have a sore neck and I sit like that. My neck doesn't hurt as much.
Yep.
But we think we can read people's minds. Oh, you think that he said that No, we don't know what people think unless we ask them. But the danger is then the reverse mind reading. If you really were my friend, you'd know what I don't want you to know what you think unless you tell me. But the danger is this. Just as a certain number of people study NLP with the aim of becoming the next Tony Robbins, which they won't, there's a certain number of people, maybe most, when they take an NLP course, instead of they think they now can mind read.
Magic boy, I can read your mind.
Calibrating, and now I know what you're thinking. Wrong. That is wrong in the wrongery as far as I'm concerned.
It really is.
Just
so watch out for that, people.
Okay, you pick up the ball here. I'm going to drink some of this perfectly ordinary coffee.
All right, you have some perfectly ordinary coffee, and we are going to, we have to move into the content that we actually want to teach here today. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start with the outcome frames?
Yeah, let's talk about the three frames.
The frames.
Robert Dilts talks about this really nicely in his book, Sleight of Mouth.
Sleight of Mouth, yeah.
The framework is the way we approach anything. We always have a framework, whether we're aware of it or not. Just like we always have an a priori. We have the beliefs and the statements and the ideas that are foundational to going into any discussion.
Yeah.
And I remember my brother-in-law, one of them said to me, "Well, I go into a discussion with no a priori." I said, "So your a priori is that you don't have one."
Yeah.
Which is really enjoyable to devastate him so effortlessly. And now we see people operate from a problem frame a lot of the time, meaning there's going to be something wrong, or this party isn't going to be good.
Oh, yeah.
Bichard's going to be there and wreck it all.
Yeah,
or my family event, they're a bunch of idiots, so it's going to be a horrible evening. They're putting a framework around the event that it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Could be a problem frame. Like right now, the problem frame could be something as simple as, my daughter is going to be turning 16 in a little while.
That is a problem.
Well, she can't have a party with more
boyfriend.
than 10 people. Yeah, no boyfriends.
Right.
You can't have a party with more than 10 people. It's illegal right now in Ontario,
it's
right?
Ridiculous. Yeah.
That could be a problem frame, but we have to move towards an outcome frame, which we could also call a solution frame, I suppose, right?
Bro, you just hold that solution frame. You really made me laugh because I thought of something just hilarious. I like it when I'm accused of something incredibly minor. So I was in the library once, took a book back, and they said, "This is overdue. You owe 60 cents on it." I slammed the book down. I said, "I am a menace to society, and I demand the death penalty." The woman in the library just looked at me. She didn't have a sense of humor. Anyway, I thought it was brilliant. So when we change the problem frame to the outcome frame, how does that work?
Well, you're moving from the stuck state, which we often talk about as when people are using the term why. Why can't I get together in a bigger group?
Why do I
always screw up? Why can't I find a job where my boss treats me with the respect that I deserve? We have to look to the outcome frame using words like how.
Right.
How can I?
How will I?
That's much better. How will I retrain myself for an even more awesome career?
Nice. Now, when you come up with that, we have to determine our outcome, which is what will we see, hear, and feel when we have X, whatever that is. Thank you. No, thank you.
Thank you.
That's my count of the thank you counters to thank you back. So what are you going to see, hear, and feel? So when the person, I hate this. Why does it? I say, what do you actually want? Mm-hmm. That's your magic question. Or what would you like to have happen?
Yeah,
what would you like language to have question. And then they say, well, I want to be happy. Okay. Now they've given you a nominalization. That's not sufficient for the outcome frame.
Right.
So what are you going to do with that?
Well, if they want to be happy, I think you have to understand the evidence criteria for when was the last time that you were happy? You can elicit information about that.
I've
or
never
you can
been happy.
imagine that you're happy right now. What do you say to yourself? What do you notice in your head? What mental movies or pictures are you making? What internal dialogue do you have? What do you feel in your body? Where do you feel it?
Yeah, nice,
All these
nice.
things, right?
And
how are you
what will
standing?
you-
How are you breathing?
What will you see, hear, and feel when you have it? See, the problem is if we don't define what the outcome is, we can go right past it and not even notice. And the second one is the impossibility frame.
Right. So I can't. You'll hear that happen a lot. Well, I can't.
I won't be able
X,
to. Yeah,
right?
there's no point. Yeah. And what's the solution to that one?
So that's where we model using the as if frame. So
Which is?
what happens if you act as if you already have or already can?
Right.
Right.
Or think of somebody who already has that and model them. You know, you can do that with a column of excellence idea. If I think that I want to be on stage and I want to be congruent and, you know, powerful, I think, who is an excellent speaker? And not that this would apply to me because I'm saying, someone like you, if you wanted to speak.
Well, if you
Who are you?
There's-
It's about you now.
it's about you.
But say somebody, a person we know who we won't name. So it
Right.
could be you, anyone has that in mind. And he wants to be a congruent speaker or whatever, or present to an audience and feel confident and able to field questions. You have them imagine somebody who can already do that.
Right. And he can step into that experience of acting as if he is that person.
Right. So you can get a really congruent, powerful person who's able to present, someone like, you know, Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, and you imagine them in front of you.
Yes.
And you fill in all the details, what they look like. And so then step into that.
And that gets to some NLP exercises.
Put that
people
on.
can
And that
do.
is the as if
Right.
frame. Now act as if you are that person. You know, some people say fake it till you make it. We don't like that. We say fake it till you become it.
Well, yeah. So there's a couple
Yes.
a couple of nuances here. First,
Yeah.
there is the simple idea that if you step into the state of mind where you are a compelling speaker, a lot of people could just dial that right immediately, like an on-off switch. Just step right into it, boom, do it. But then there are things that involve skill and learning and all that. So we can apply the as if frame and put it more into process of learning. Imagine that I am, instead of being this stuck, you know, oh, I can't, I never can. Imagine what would it be like if you were already on your way towards learning how to be an expert in that, whatever it is.
That's
now
good.
it's more of a dimmer switch.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
like that
because
sound
you
effect?
can't. Yeah, it works. You can't apply the as if frame to things like brain surgery and flying a jet plane. You can't just act as though you can. No, you still need the resources, but by acting congruently in that role, you'll get better at it.
Sure.
Of course, you have the imposter syndrome working, but
Yeah, if you think of something that involves obviously a lot of brain surgery, you know, you're not going to just be an amazing brain surgeon using as if frame. But what if you were to act as if you're an amazing medical student, surgical student?
yeah,
How does the best student turn into the best surgeon? Well, there's a set of processes and a set of beliefs and a set of behaviors that person is probably doing.
so you can act as if it's possible. Yeah. Now then we've got the failure frame, which moves to the feedback frame. The failure frame is,
Yeah.
I blow it
suck
every
at that.
time. I
Yeah.
don't have the resource. I can't do this.
I
Every
can't
time
do
I
that.
try,
I can't-
lose weight. You know, everybody in my family is 150 pounds overweight.
It never works.
So we change failure to feedback,
Right.
where it just becomes data. It just becomes information. And this is a great one to deal with criticism. If when you get criticized by someone, you feel like a failure, you probably have inflated loops in your small letter T's and D's, graphologically speaking. But if you feel a failure, if someone is treating you, you know, with any kind of criticism, you can instantly dissociate and just imagine this is feedback. This is useful feedback, even if its only use is not
This
to hang around with
is
this person anymore.
useful.
Did you hear that brilliant
Yeah.
line?
Yeah,
That was
that
very
one.
funny. Okay.
Even
so,
if the only useful feedback is not to hang around with that person. Which reminds us to
This is an
point out that
intervention, yeah.
you can fire people from your lives, right? If they
haven't
are
said that
if
lately.
they are encouraging your failure or support, not encouraging so much, but if they keep reminding you, oh, you can never get it right. Well, maybe that person is not useful in your
well, you're
life.
right, Chris, because you know there are people who specialize in pushing people's buttons and putting them in a bad state.
Dragging them down. Yeah.
Yep. And just
I want to also mention that in NLP, it can be useful to tell people stories to help them reframe. Now, one of the common metaphors that is used to explain the failure versus feedback frame is just the idea that imagine you're driving a car down road, or maybe you're at the tiller of a sailboat and the wind is carrying it and you're attempting to keep that boat on a certain bearing. And 99
a certain bearing or a certain heading?
Heading, thank you.
Okay, just checking.
I think that's better. Yeah.
Piracy.
Keeping it on a particular compass angle.
Yeah.
All right. And how much of the time, if you're if you are targeting exactly 50 degrees, how often are you exactly on that? 0. Theoretically,
no, very infrequently.
If you divide this into infinitesimally small slices,
Language police.
You're actually never on the heading that you intend. You are constantly failing to be on that heading and making a series of adjustments along the way.
Yeah.
Just like if you're driving a car, you are constantly adjusting the steering wheel unconsciously most of the time for most of us. And yet you still stay in your lane and get to your destination.
No, that's intriguing because you brought out a strategy here. And I can tell this is going to go to podcast 3 on this because we're going to go a lot. No, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
We're always looking for damn content. We'll edit that out. Listen, one of my family members is notorious for walking into people in stores. I'm not kidding. Like physically,
by
not meeting people. Good to see you again. I don't mean that. I mean,
but you
literally
mean physically bumping into a
especially
person.
in grocery stores, like running the cart into people's ankles and into their cart with an immense collision. And I never do that, of course. I'm very, very aware of my surroundings to almost a ridiculous degree. But he or she asked me, how come you don't ever? No, what you do it too? I said I never do.
So you have a strategy.
My strategy is bearing and heading must match.
Yeah,
I mean it's as simple as that. Bearing is the way you're looking. Heading is the way you're going. And if you're looking one direction, your bearing is off, and you're heading in a different direction, you'll crash into things.
Do you know I didn't know the difference between heading and bearing until you just taught me that right now. See, I learn something on this podcast every day.
That was a wonderful thing from too much time wasted playing silent service submarine games, Sid Meier's games in the 80s. But
bearing and heading must match. That is a nice. Yeah, we could put that on a T-shirt.
Now, an early part of NLP, which is one of the ways that a lot of people came to it, which is interesting because I think John Grinder said it really only has about a 60% success rate, but it's still better than 50%. And that's probably because they're not doing it correctly. It's the swish pattern.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So this can be the thing that you can learn from this podcast and then use on something. In fact, the swish pattern is something that I used when I'm 46 as of this recording.
This isn't about biting your nails, is it?
Yep, it is. I used the swish pattern in a hotel room in Calgary, Alberta.
Don't go admitting too much
on a business trip. One
Careful.
time, I just decided I didn't want to bite my nails anymore.
Yeah.
Instead, I wanted to have nice looking nails.
Now, was it so bad? Had it reached the point that you were biting in the bitery?
Probably. No, they wouldn't bleed or anything. It was just a bad habit, and they never looked like nice professional
It didn't
nails.
get to your toenails.
They didn't match the idea of someone wearing a suit and a tie and being all confident.
Yeah.
And look at those horrible nails. It was
get
not
nails like
congruent.
Jack the Ripper. Yeah.
So I just decided to use the swish pattern. It took about 3 or 4 minutes, and I've never been a nail biter.
That's great, because typically you only have to do about 6 swishes to make it work.
Yep.
Explain how you did it.
So, okay, let's actually talk about how the swish pattern works first, and we'll walk through it. You can correct me if I get any of this wrong, Mike.
I'm sure you'll be
correct.
correct.
It's been a very long time since I've been taught this, but the basic idea is that you want to create you want to trigger what would be a neurological pathway in your brain, the event that directly precedes you biting your nails. So in this case, I'm forming an image, it's all visual system, but that can be changed, I suppose. But most people teach this with visual.
All right.
So I'm going to form an image associated of me just prior to biting my nails. So in this case, and you're here in the studio with me, so you're seeing me do this. I'm holding my hand up towards my mouth as if I'm about, using the as if.
Careful you don't trigger
as if I'm about to bite my nails. And I'm looking through my own eyes. So I'm seeing this super close up, zoomed in image of my hand right near my mouth, and
he's doing it.
I'm about to bite my nails.
Like Jack the Nail Biter.
And I see the nails, they look kind of, not so nice, right? Just gross.
It's kind of Popeye.
So that's the image that I start with. then what you do, and that fills your imaginary screen in your mind, okay? If you think of your mind's eye as a movie theater or something, put that image on that movie theater in full 3D, full color, just right up close. Then in one corner, in the size of a postage stamp, I'm going to form another image. And that image is the way I want to see myself. Dissociated. So I see myself standing tall with a bit of like a Superman empowering
Perfect
pose.
nails.
And my nails are visible because I've got my hands on my hips and, my nails are visible and I can see that I'm smiling. I'm standing proud and tall and breathing and I'm strong. And my nails
And
look
you're
great.
no longer a nail biter, you're a nail lever alone.
Yes, my nails look great. I'm a nail grower and a nail groomer. And a nail
and a Rogerer
and a nail pusher, a nail grower and a nail groomer. Yeah. So that's the second image, right? Now, what you do in your mind is you take that second image that's postage stamp sized, and when you make a swish sound in your mind, like whoosh, you blow up that postage stamp sized image to overpower and overtake the nail bitery image.
Nice.
And then you break state. Open your eyes, shake it off. Okay, close your eyes again. Reimagine that hand coming up to the face. You're about to bite those nails. You can even do it as a movie if you want.
Sure.
And then introduce that postage stamp sized version of the way you want to, the way you will be again, and whoosh, say swish in your mind and bring it to the surface. Just have it explode and crash through the old image. And basically open and close your eyes, breaking state between each cycle. Yep. And doing it faster and faster. Your unconscious
Now let's talk about that. You said
lose.
doing it faster and faster, and that's a really important point here. I know the reason, but let's presume that someone listening doesn't.
You want your brain to learn to replace the old neural pathway with this new opportunity.
And the old one eventually becomes pruned and falls away. Even with long-term potentiation, it's just not going to stay there.
So I think at the time, we didn't have all the neuroscience to back all of this up and understand things like self-directed neuroplasticity or whatever it is, right? I love that term. I think I learned that term first from Melissa Tiers.
Yeah, so did I.
And so self-directed, meaning you're doing it, neuroplasticity, you're creating new neural pathways in your brain. This is happening all the time. We're just doing it on purpose for the purpose of creating a new pathway, a new opportunity. We're going to we're going to cause our brain, as Melissa likes to explain this, we're going to cause our brain to run into a roadblock on the old path and find a new path that we're creating.
And so much works that exact way. Chris, that was a very good explanation. I'll give you the new code variant here. The new code variant, you're involving your hands as well. Yeah. So what I'm doing, if I was doing a swish, I would have the same, because we're going present state, associated, desired state, dissociated, exactly the same. If I were doing the nail biting thing, which I don't, of course, I've got beautiful nails. I'm fleet of foot, fair of face. I'm firm buttocked. I'm a roarer and a gorger and a puker and a rogerer.
That's so weird.
Anyway, so I'd have the close up picture of the nails. I'm likewise holding up my hand to my mouth.
Yes.
But I would have a tiny dot, which would be representing the me standing, Superman pose, perfect nails, whatever, dissociated, grinning like Jack the Grinner. And with my hand, I'd have to reach around this microphone.
Grab it and stretch it.
Yeah, stretch it, pull it back like a rubber band, and boom, let it blast the other one apart, open my eyes, and do that repeatedly.
Yes.
And the same thing would happen. You're replacing it 6 times is usually enough. The brain likes to learn quickly.
Similarly, you can have 2 spots on the ground and you can use motion, right? So you could simply stand in this is me as a nail biter.
Yeah, like Jack the Stander.
And imagine visually as you're standing in the spot and then literally step into the new position where you can even open your eyes and do it this way. Open your eyes and see the new you, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it really does work. Do it properly, keep it moving. But Chris, you have a special report for us.
Mike, we have a special report from Brad in Hypno North, Mayford, Ontario.
Yeah, how are you now? And that Brado here. I'm podcasting on my iPhone 5 from Highway 26, just about halfway between Meaford and Owen Sound, eh? And here's this hypnosis update and that. First of all, a lot of people have written in supporting my segment in the podcast. It seems there's a lot of interest, and me continuing to cover hypnosis in Meaford and even Shallow Lake and that. So if this goes well, I'll be branching out to Owen Sound too, eh? So here goes with the hypnosis update. couple or 3 days ago, I decided to go out for breakfast, because I was in a foul mood and that, because the backhoe I was riding on rolled onto a couple of fence posts and knocked an axle all arse over tea kettle and that. Well, if that didn't suck enough, I ordered a replacement sign for my hypnosis business. You recall the first sign had a hypno spiral after my name, Brad. I started using it like a letter O, asking people around here to call me Brado, which is cool, but none of the sons of whores would remember to do it. Then the spiral fell out of the sign. There was just a space after Brad. My cousin Ed, who's a dick, started calling me Brad Space, like he couldn't remember it was Brado now on account of the spiral being not there and that. So anyway, I got a replacement sign put up. Finally got my first customer who phoned me on the landline, His voice was weird, and he said he had a sign phobia. He wanted cured in that, and wanted me to take the damn sign down before he'd come in for hypnosis. So I did, Then the Horson couldn't find my place because there was no effing sign. So the whole appointment got bitched, just like that sickening sign had and that. So, to cheer myself up, I went to splurge on breakfast at the Chatsworth Cafe and put on a COVID mask so I could get in, I ordered the big luxury breakfast, which is an egg and a bunch of other stuff and that and coffee. I see this dick at the other table staring at me, while I'm eating that, and I thought he recognized me from my segment on the podcast. But it turned out he was just a shithead who thought I was a hockey player for the Owen Sound District High School team, which is totally effed up because I'm 26 and I've been out of school for nearly 3 years now, Anyway, we got yakking about hypnosis, which, as you know, is my specialty. I went to hypnotize him with a Dave Lemon induction, and that went south pretty quick, and nothing worked, and the horse and hand fell right into my eggs and ketchup. The whole day was just nothing but an emotional rat poison. So that's my report, Oh, yeah, some dick at the sign company that was making my new sign put the hypno spiral at the beginning, so now instead of saying Brado, it says, oh, Brad. I'm not even Irish or nothing. So now that's sickening things, bitch, too. So this is Brado up in Hypno North Meaford, signing off for now, and that.
Thanks to Brad for his update from Hypno North, Meaford, Ontario. Let's get back to the podcast, Mike. Let's move along. We just talked about the swish pattern and the improved swish pattern that you described using movement. What else can we give people?
Let's talk about the pattern interrupt. Because a pattern interrupt is classic NLP. And the whole thing about a pattern interrupt is people tend to run their program to completion. So if somebody, sees their wife look at them a certain way, puts them in a really bad state, she's mocking me, whatever, they've got to learn to pattern interrupt that immediately. Like Melissa said, putting up a stop sign.
This is great, actually, because, in fact, when she talked about self-directed neuroplasticity, a lot of the times—
Try and say that after 3 hits of acid.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I love that she does, and the hand gesture that I'm making here that I can't show the listeners, but you know what I mean?
Not because it's obscene or anything.
She'll ask people when she's using the meta pattern.
Yeah.
She will, which is something we're not going to talk about it, but she will elicit the exact thing that we just talked about with the swish pattern. And when I was describing the idea of bringing my hands up to my mouth and seeing that moment right before I bite, that's the key, right before. So she'll elicit in somebody else whatever is the trigger, the right before they feel that way or they have that anxiety, whatever it is. And then she'll put out her hand and say, stop. And at that specific moment, she'll do a hand gesture thing that gets people really tuned into exactly what it is. That's the pattern. And then there's a pattern interrupt.
Then you've got to replace it. You've got to put in a new pattern because you're stopping the old neural pathway. Now, think of it, guys. And we've said this before. It's like a pathway through the forest. And if you walk through the forest the first time, there's twigs and things, there's no path. If you take the same route every single day, eventually there's a path. Other people then start to follow it. And it becomes a very easy path to access. And people go that way instead of plowing through the underbrush. But if you stop using the path, and everybody stops using it, it begins to become overgrown again. So you make a brand new path. The stop sign stops you using the path, and then you have to condition in something in its place.
And that's why we like stupid context-free humor. Sometimes when somebody's getting frustrated and they drop something, we might just shout, whoa, this stuff really comes out. It doesn't make any sense at all. But it will interrupt their pattern. And then if you can replace the interrupted pattern that was going to follow the resolution of them being very frustrated in the wrong state of mind, if you can make them laugh or do something else, you can interrupt that pattern.
It's
and
all
you can
so
teach
clear.
them a new.
It is so clear.
Right.
And realize, Chris, I used to do the one of smelling underneath my wristwatch.
Explain this one.
So
this is so funny.
Going into their pattern, they're stressed, they're depressed, and I would smell underneath my wristwatch with a real loud like that, which is gross, and that would freak them out. It breaks their pattern. I wouldn't let them get back in, and then I would start moving them out of it into a new state. It's not that hard. Anything you really want to change, and I just want to give Melissa credit here, and then we're going to go to the empowering question.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give Melissa credit here. I had a bad pattern in my own life, even as an NLP trainer. And when we brought her to Toronto and she was doing a teaching for us on the weekend, just fantastic trainer. And we just love the woman. She's great. But she helped me with something. I would find myself in my kitchen, Chris, at 11 p.m. My wife had gone to bed, standing over this giant jar of dried fruit.
Oh,
cherries
yeah,
and
the dried
raisins
fruit
and
problem.
apricots, just handfuls of dried fruit.
Did you say apricots?
Yeah, apricots,
Oh, okay.
English,
All right.
proper.
All right.
So just handfuls of this, loading my system with sugar and
Fructose,
insulin
yeah.
when I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah.
No wonder I'm awake at 3 a.m.
Mhm.
So she did that same thing, the exact instant, the trigger,
Yeah.
and removed it for me. And I've never done it again.
Yeah, that's
Never
awesome.
done it again. But so when you want to stop something, notice when you are beginning the old program, actually hold your hand up and say, stop. Push this picture away, whatever it is.
That's the old me.
That's the old me. And now put in a new statement like, I'm choosing to eat healthy now,
Yep.
or whatever it is.
Yep, I'm living a great life now. She doesn't bother me that way anymore because I spend my time focusing on people that
A little more complex.
whatever it is.
Losing
Yeah.
interest. Yeah. Okay. So Chris, give us the special question. We have the special
Empowering
question. Yeah.
The special question. Mike, do you think you could get a little more empowering
I
with
think
that
so.
request?
We would like the question, Chris. The
All right,
empowering
and
question.
then we are doing a part three
And it's
in the
gonna be
next
good.
episode.
We'll give you more cool
All right,
stuff.
we'll focus even more on cool interventions.
Take it away,
that
buddy.
You can do. All right, empowering question for this podcast episode, which is: ask yourself, since I have much more control over my emotions and my mental states than someone who doesn't know these things, what advantage, I mean real advantage, will I gain by learning to excel in interesting new areas?
Buddy, that's fantastic. Great question. I have a Meta 5, which, of course, if you're new to our podcast, a Meta 5 is a metaphor, but even better. That's how we do them. That's how we do it downtown. So here's one. I call this the story of Norman and Uncle Stan. This is one Chris has never heard, but it came up this week. I was up at our cabin, or last week I was talking to my friend Brian McDowell, who I'd known since grade 6. Very good friend. And we were talking about some of these things we remembered, and we brought up this story. Norman lived in my apartment building, 1651 Victoria Park Avenue, when I was a kid. And I grew up there from age 10 to 21. So all my formative years, all my teenage years, my first girlfriend, second, third, fourth, fifth, that was all there. And with the Zing Burger across the street, steak on a bun late at night, it was fantastic. Led Zeppelin. I mean, everything that was formative in my life from age 10 to 21 happened in that building. And one thing I found interesting was there was a little kid, Norman, who lived there for a short period of time, I suspect only about a year. He was about a year younger than me, maybe 2. Nice little kid, big smile, curly sort of light brown hair, had a little toboggan, and he'd ride it down the hill behind the parking lot of our apartment, and he'd yell to the North Pole and ride down this hill. Except once he hit a bump at the bottom and he sort of threw up in the doorway for a few minutes and then went up to his apartment, and no one's ever figured out why. But Norman had an Uncle Stan. Now, in retrospect, as an adult looking back and a 5,000-year-old wizard, I can probably figure that Uncle Stan was his mother's live-in boyfriend, and they called him Uncle Stan. Uncle Stan I met once. He was a scary guy. He'd walk around with his shirt off. You can't make this stuff up, and glasses. He had a stern look. He never smiled. And I remember Norman's mom would spend her time popping blackheads on Uncle Stan's back.
Oh.
And she had it down to an art. It was very odd. Well, one day, Norman and I were there hanging out, and Norman was, just kidding around. He's a little kid. Somehow knocks over a big porcelain lamp, table lamp. It smashes into 1,000 pieces. He's in terror. I'm in terror. I had nothing to do with it. And Uncle Stan says, now you've done it, haven't you? Now you're in for it, ain't you? And Norman says, yes. And he said, you better get going, hadn't you? You better get going. And Norman says, I am. Starts putting his shoes on. And Uncle Stan says, hey, where do you think you're going? I'll hit you twice as hard for trying to get away. That was my first view of cognitive dissonance, and I fled the apartment.
Thanks, everybody, for listening to Brain Software with Mike Mandel, and I'm Chris Thompson. This has been episode 161, part two of our now turning into a 3-part series on neuro-linguistic programming. We hope you love it.
So it's okay.
We are working hard. If you're listening to this more or less in real time when we're publishing it, it will be October 2020, and we're working on our NLP online course, which is probably going to be released in January of 2021. That's our goal.
It's going to be a good one.
That's our ambition. It's going to be an awesome course. So we hope you stay tuned. Keep listening to the episodes. We'll get on our email list. We'll tell you more about when it's released. And
go get the Castle download if you haven't.
Yep.
It is free.
Get the Castle at mikemandelhypnosis.com/Castle. And you'll hear from us again, and maybe Brado, in the next episode.
Thanks again.
And good night.
Schweberoren glacha, boradweni glivarste, boradweni glivarste, glachen glüd, gloren baradaran dwineth, glüram wera schlachan glir. It was there that we called him Billy. Brilliant. It was so cool.